crime that really I thought was the Asian American hate crime. But apparently, after I did my meditation last week, I've come to the conclusion that maybe it's not. Maybe that it's like a passing thing. Welcome to Emil and Amok's Takeout, my takes on all things considerable. I am the aforementioned Emil Guillermo. We come on Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. Pacific time to talk about things that caught my eye, things that are important to me, things that I think are important to you. If you're, I call this the micro talk show of the AAPI and the AAXs and the ALLs, all the rest of you. Subtitled, this is, when you're thinking about too many titles, say, that's a good title, that's a good, so you have subtitle. Subtitled, what does an Asian American think? Because no one ever asks us. And so I've been thinking about VChin. It's for a week now. And then all throughout last week, from the 19th through the 19th, the 20th, the 21st, the 22nd, and the 23rd, when they took VChin off life support and he officially died after his beating in a parking lot of a fast food restaurant in Highland Park, Michigan, after he was run down, chased down by a perp, a white auto worker who he met at a bar in Detroit. He was clubbed to death, still alive in a coma. And like I said, in a coma from the 19th, the 20th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd, they pulled the life support. And that, I just began to see a little smidgen of reporting about VChin. Maybe it's because it's 41 years after. But believe me, for a generation of Asian Americans, that was the most important thing in their lives. It awakened them to social justice issues. And then what I find as I meditate on the story of VChin, that after all these years, people have forgotten him. People, some new Asian Americans, if you were just born in the 1990s and 2000s, some don't even know. I was talking, this is show 546, by the way. If you caught show 545 with Professor Daniel Phil Gonzalez. Now, the key thing about Dan is that Dan was part of the 68 strike at San Francisco State University that formed Asian American Studies and College of Ethnic Studies at San Francisco State. And he was saying he's professor emeritus now, just for like a year or two. And he said, I know when he taught his courses, he always taught VChin and that story, but now he doesn't know if they're teaching VChin. I'm sure they must be, but this was the Asian American story in one person's life and how it was shortened by a murder. It encapsulates the Asian American experience. And so that's why I chose to talk about it a little each day from June 19th, which ironically is Juneteenth. If you go to my column on the ALDEF blog, the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund, I point out the irony that on June 19th, when black slaves, after 2 years of the Emancipation Proclamation, two plus years, finally in Texas, people were told, hey, slavery's over. Justice delayed, justice denied. Ultimately, you get justice, and maybe that's the lesson to learn if we find the irony of VChin being clubbed, knocked unconscious on June 19th, 1982. The irony is that at some point we will get justice. But I think the truth is maybe we don't. Maybe we get time and it recedes into history, and some people still get it and some people are yet to learn about it for the first time. And that, I think, is after I just wanted to come in and begin this show by talking about what did I get from meditating, talking about VChin and his case for the 19th through the 23rd, all last week, for a little bit of this show. And I think I've always proposed that this be the thing for Asian Americans, that we take the time from the 19th to the 23rd to just reflect. Think about what happened, because for a lot of people, it will be the first time that they've heard of VChin. They'll say, Vincent who? They won't know all the facts. But I know that VChin has been like a companion of my life, and it has become almost like a metaphor for my life of Asian American life. I mean, all right, I'm not dead. No one killed me, but in the VChin murder, it almost encapsulates Asian American experience. Almost. I mean, there are people who do wonderfully well, are wildly successful, avoid getting clubbed to death. You know, they're the exception. But for many of us, we can relate to this man who has his life taken from him too soon, right? So if you want to know the basic facts again, I'll do this and then we'll move on, right? 41 years. And then replay Friday's show, 545 and 544. Replay, all of the shows from last week. And get my meditation on what happened June 19th, 1982, when VChin, who was just 27, was with his friends at a bar in Detroit. It was Chin's bachelor party. They're seen by two white auto workers, Ronald Ebens' stepson, Michael Nitz. Ebens told me that Chin sucker punched him. And that's undisputed. Doesn't give Ebens the right to do anything, but it is a fact. The fight was taken outside. It was broken up. It should have ended there, but Ebens and his stepson hunted down Chin by car. They retrieved a baseball bat from one of their cars. And then when Chin and his friends left, they sought him out. They found him in a parking lot at McDonald's. And that's where Ebens took a swing at VChin, who was comatose for 4 days. So it's the 19th, the 20th, the 21st, the 22nd. On the 23rd, they took away life support and he was pronounced dead. But the facts that people usually don't get, I mean, those are important facts. But remember this, Ebens and Nitz were allowed to plea bargain. In state court, they pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. Maybe it should have been first. They pleaded to second degree. Sentenced to 3 years probation, fined $3,720, no prison time for the murderers of Vincent Chin. The Asian American community awoke. They were outraged. They got a federal civil rights prosecution against Ebens and Nitz. Ebens was found guilty on one charge and sentenced to 25 years in prison. He appealed to the Sixth Circuit, and a second federal trial was moved from Detroit to Cincinnati. That change of venue was fortunate for Ebens, who was acquitted by a Cincinnati jury. They found no racial motivation in the killing of Chin, which is why Ebens says, hey, look, it had nothing to do with race. Yeah, but you killed a man. Served no time. Found not guilty. And then to add insult to injury, there was a civil case for the wrongful death of Vincent Chin. The Chin family was awarded $2 million in a civil litigation back in the 80s. And to this day, Ronald Ebens uses the bankruptcy laws to avoid paying a dime to the Chin estate. Those are the facts. And that's why this is a story that really, for a generation, for 41 years, at least two generations, it was the rallying call for Asian Americans and Asian American activism. And it's almost sad in a way that we have seen it evolve, and instead of being this case that everyone knows, I think many Asian Americans know, or they know something about Chin, but it's still a matter where, oh, I got to Google that, or I got to, they don't know. And it really should be something that all Asian Americans, I think, should know chapter and verse. They should know this is what happened. This is why a community was outraged. And now we go into a next generation where Asian Americans are not just on the coast, east and west. And, you know, they're more in the Midwest, Texas, Chicago, Detroit. And now you're finding Asian Americans in places like Omaha, Nebraska, because that's where the refugees have found themselves migrating. Minnesota, right, the Hmong. You find Vietnamese and different Asian communities in Atlanta, the Koreans, the South Koreans in Atlanta. You find Asian Americans in all these far-flung places, and many of them, their history of the United States doesn't begin until the year 2000 or the year 2020. You say Vincent Chin, and they say Vincent who? It's now Asian Americans who say it. It's not the whites. It used to be white people would say Vincent who. Now it's Asian Americans say that. And I think that was one of the things from doing my reflection. I mean, I've been doing these 5-day reflections each day since I've been doing this show, but also certainly writing my columns, thinking about Vincent Chin. And I think a lot of times people just say, look, too much rear view mirror, Emil. Look forward. Okay, so look forward. So are we looking forward to the hate crime prosecution of Robert Aaron Long for the hate crimes in Fulton County? The Atlanta bomb murderers? Let's look forward to that. Let's look forward to the crimes that were committed and the status of those crimes in the criminal justice system that were committed during the pandemic that brought on record numbers of anti-Asian hate. Are we looking forward to that, or are we just like forgetting about it? Because that was one thing about the pandemic and the stats, the Stop AAPI Hate movement. When President Trump, ex-President Trump, the twice impeached, twice arraigned former president, when he started scapegoating Asian Americans. I mean, really. I mean, that was interesting to see the reaction from people like, what? Whoa, going after Asians? Asian hate? They didn't understand. But you get 6 Korean Americans killed in Atlanta spas by a white supremacist or a young white male with white supremacist views, and you wonder, wow, didn't we learn something from VChin? So, but that's why you had all the stories come out. It was like our introduction again. Hey, by the way, here are these Asian Americans. They're here. You may not have noticed them. They don't make a lot of noise. They don't say a lot. But by the way, this is a hate crime. And then, of course, you had the debate. Oh, it's not a hate crime. Oh, yes, it is a hate crime. Oh, no, it's not a hate crime. Yeah, yes, it is. And even in Georgia, one county convicted Robert Aaron Long for the I believe Cherokee County, for the murders he committed there. But in Fulton County, Fani Willis, she's using the new hate crime law. So we'll see. She, of course, has her hands full trying to prosecute a former president. So we'll see what happens. But I thought what Professor Dan Gonzalez said was interesting. He said, God, I just don't know if people really understand how this goes way back. And you don't have to go that far back, 41 years. It's not like you have to go back to the 19th century and the Chinese exclusion laws and the days when Chinese Americans were lynched in Los Angeles and the riots there, or the days in the 20s when Filipinos were shot. You don't have to go back that far. You could just go back 41 years to VChin, and how quickly we've forgotten the story. So I do what I can to at least make sure that we touch on it once a year, from June 19th to June 23rd. And here we are on June 26th. And you know that by time VChin is pronounced dead, right? Back in 82, when he's kept on life support, and then finally the news breaks and he's dead. That sinks in. And by June 26, 1982, stories come out, and this is where the outrage really begins to explode within the Asian American community back then. So still important to, if you've missed out, check out what I wrote on the ALDEF blog, and it'll link you to my interview with Ronald Liebens back in 2012. And also to some of the writings and podcasting I did with Helen Zia back in 2017. She's the trustee of the Chin estate. And she shared some things that I did not understand or think about. But, back in 82, Asian Americans were not seen as, they were barely model minority. Asian Americans were right now, there's 23 million Asian Americans. what, 6-7% of the United States. Back then, it was a fraction, not 23 million. It was more like, I think, like 5 million, 3 to 5 million. It was very small. We were very quiet. And there, as I recall, I was just beginning I wasn't just beginning my career in television news, but I was in San Francisco, where was a place you could be Asian American in TV news, and being Asian meant something. I remember I was in Dallas in television news. They thought I was Mexican. Then I got to San Francisco and people said, "Oh, you're Filipino." Yeah, Asian American. And it made sense. And even then, in 82, I wasn't covering the VChin story. I mean, there were other Asian American reporters, but back then I was on general assignment. Wasn't my story. But I remember thinking about it, but I could not really express my feelings about the story. And until later, when I became a columnist, when I started writing about it. So just some post VChin week reflections. I just wanted to kick off the show and doing this. Certainly, there's so many a lot of stories out there. Russia, the thing about Russia that's scary, I mean, we had a mini insurrection. They're going in for the kill. It's a coup, and then it's not a coup. And now Putin is out there saying, hey, he's angry. He's mad. Who knows what's going to happen now? But it kind of shows that he doesn't have the kind of power that everyone else thinks. So now what is he going to do to retaliate? Now he's friends again with the guy who started the coup? I don't know. If you haven't been following Russia and Ukraine, and people are saying now maybe Russia should never got into Ukraine. They don't have the wherewithal. They don't have the force. Even Vivek Ramaswamy, the Asian American running for president, is now saying, looks like Putin's a paper tiger. What does Vivek Ramaswamy know? Oh, he's just got a couple $1 million. That doesn't give him knowledge, but he's a presidential candidate. So he goes on Fox and Friends and says, oh, Putin's a paper tiger. Well, okay. This is a test. Who would you rather see as president at a time like this? And you go up and down the list and you say, Vivek Ramaswamy? I don't know. But I think Biden's doing the right thing. He came out strong today. He said, hey, look, we're not a part of this. This is an internal Russian thing. Russian problem. Because there'll be people out there saying, oh, the U.S. is involved. Oh, NATO isn't. No. This is an internal Russian thing. And, they've got mercenaries fighting for them. And the mercenaries have a little more power than the insiders in Russia believe or thought. So why is it all important? Well, Russia has more nukes than anyone in the world. Who's in charge? Who's got the codes? That's why you got to care. So keep one eye out there. Of course, if you're Asian American, I mean, we're looking at the Supreme Court, because we're all waiting for these big decisions, and they're more than just the affirmative action decision. I mean, I was just looking at the AP wire. You got affirmative action, right, where they can decide on college admissions and the use of race in the cases of Harvard, in the cases of the University of North Carolina. I mean, it's a big deal, and it does mean the end. It could mean the end of affirmative action. I'm going to talk about more of that just in a bit. They got the student loan issue. The justices are going to decide if Joe Biden's plan to get rid of student loan debt is constitutional. I mean, it really is a simple issue. Biden wants to erase 10,000 in federal student loan debt, which would be tremendous. And if you have incomes below 125,000 a year, which I think is reasonable, because a lot of people with that kind of, I mean, you could be a parent like myself and have that kind of debt because of our kids. So this has been on hold. They'll have to rule on this. That's a big one. There's a gay rights issue. The gay rights folks and the religious right folks. This is a Christian graphic artist from Colorado who wants to begin designing wedding websites, but doesn't want to make wedding websites for same-sex couples. So that's going to be a big ruling. Can you force someone to do a wedding website for someone that you may not agree with their lifestyle choices? Now, state law requires businesses that are open to the public to provide services to all customers, but the Christian graphic artist says, hey, that violates my free speech rights. So maybe you don't have a public company. Maybe you just do something and it's like, so you can have a sign that says straight people only. But that doesn't strike me as right. What is the Supreme Court going to find? So those are the three big ones that are yet to be decided on. The Supreme Court today, though, did come out with a ruling that says, once again, in a total surprise, they sided with the Voting Rights Act, which usually is something that the Supreme Court helps dismantle voting rights. But just like in a previous case, a couple of weeks ago, they said Alabama had to redraw maps because it wasn't fair that you have no districts where blacks can vote in a representative. Got to redraw the maps. And now in Louisiana, a case in Louisiana, the same thing. You can't just drop these lines, these redistricting lines for all white districts and leave out the blacks. So that was a surprise because the Voting Rights Act has been in part demolished because of the Supreme Court. Maybe, I don't know, maybe this is the way that the Supreme Court says, hey, we're not racist. We're fair. Look, redraw the maps. And that'll give them the opportunity to come back and say, oh, but by the way, on this affirmative action thing, who knows what they're going to do. And that's sort of the issue. I mean, I was reading the New York Times today. And the New York Times, where is that? It was a conversation between Gail Collins, who I like Gail Collins, and Brett Stevens. I don't like Brett Stevens. So you have, Gail Collins, more to the left, more liberal, Brett Stevens, more fascist. And I think I'm being fair there. And the title, While We Wait for the Supreme Court to Make Up Its Mind. And I didn't have to read it because that is exactly the way I felt the last 4 weeks, the last 3 weeks. While we wait for the Supreme Court to make up its mind. Because we have been waiting. ever since the end of Memorial Day, right? We've been waiting for the Supreme Court to say, yeah, we'll take the case. Yeah, we'll hear the case. Yeah, we'll come out with a decision. Oh, before our vacation. Well, last week of vacation, here it is. This has got to be the week. And the title, while we wait for the Supreme Court to make up its mind, it's sort of like, waiting for Godot, right? You have this feeling that we're all waiting. And we don't know. And we see all these permutations of the court come down. An 8-1 decision that was an unlikely way the court would be, a 5-4 decision. I mean, we always thought it was a 6-3, conservatives, right, to liberal. And then the voting rights was 5-4. And then one recent one was 8-1. This is not as rigid a court, apparently. So maybe they're just bracing us for a surprise. Like maybe go back down to to the lower court's decision. Maybe, possibly. Or maybe and the lower court decision was to uphold affirmative action. Or maybe what they'll do is say, oh, Harvard was bad in the personality assessments that they used. But race should just be race and not a personality assessment. Or something like that. Something that would uphold the way race is used now. The Grutter case, which says you can use race, and then to use, not have a comment by Sandra Day O'Connor, Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, years ago, who said, in 25 years, we may not need this, suggesting that this was all temporary, but not putting any weight on that because she's gone. But some people might say, well, Sandra Day O'Connor said, 25 years, we may not need this. Now it's time to get rid of it. No. Maybe it's not time. And the use of race was always fine as long as it was narrow, right? As long as it was narrowly defined and not used as the be-all, end-all. And every single case since then has proven to be a narrow use of race, which has kept affirmative action alive. You can use race in decision making. It just can't have quotas. That was from a decision way back, the Bakke decision in the 70s. So I guess we really don't know what's going to happen with the court, and maybe they are just still trying to make up their minds. Is it like the civil, the voting rights cases where they see that there are no black maps, and then they sent they sent back the old maps and say, you got to come up with a new one. Alabama, Louisiana, this week it was Louisiana. You got to come up with, a black district so blacks can have a representative. Wow. Well, doesn't that suggest you can use race in a narrow way to get to solve a problem that would indicate an injustice, which means some form of affirmative action would be okay? That's one way to look at it. So I'm kind of hopeful now. I'm kind of hopeful that maybe it's not going to be like the end. But I remember talking to some people about this and saying, boy, it feels like a reversal. It feels like a reversal is coming. I wrote about this in my ALDEF column, aaldef.org/blog, where I said it's the death knell. This sounds like the death knell for affirmative action. They're going to come back and they're going to say, that's it. And you can't do it. Can't use race. We're going to move toward colorblind. I mean, that's sort of been the assumption that everyone's had. And now I don't know if that's necessarily true. And I've been kind of melancholy. Like, oh man, affirmative action is going away. And as a beneficiary of affirmative action, I felt like, yeah, I don't know. I felt like it was similar to the Dobbs ruling that brought down abortion, that brought down Roe v. Wade, that if the Supreme Court comes down and takes down affirmative action, I think it would be a moment to shed a tear. But one thing has happened since this waiting for the Supreme Court. I mean, I've become more confident that maybe there's another answer. Maybe they'll go another way, or maybe no matter what way they go, there's still another way to protect people of color who want into the college of their choice, public or private. Because, you know, the affirmative action decision, whatever happens, is going to have an impact on all schools, not just the elite ones, but also the public schools. Just so happens that the public schools have more than, you know, they're pretty good in terms of people of color at the public schools. Private schools, not so much. But I think there is a way that we can assure that people of color get in to the school of their choice. I think. I'm confident. And here's what made me confident. I was just looking over the record. Here I am in California feeling bad about affirmative action. And where has affirmative action been outlawed? Since 95 with Prop 209, where the voters voted for the so-called Civil Rights Act, or Civil Rights Amendment in the California Constitution, which says, you know, which was for colorblind admissions in college, and also, you know, and do affirmative action in public hiring and contracting. We haven't had it. They tried to, you know, in a super democratic state like California, that's kind of like odd, right? But maybe that's sort of like the way you can get two things can exist. You have a super majority in the state legislature, and they can't undo what the voters in an open plebiscite, you know, passed. Maybe that's the balance, because they tried, the supermajority in the state legislature tried to get rid of that ban on affirmative action. I believe in like 2000, and like 2010, SCA 5, I think, was the bill. They couldn't do it. There are too many people who liked not having affirmative action. And those people were Asian American. So, you know, we've managed in California. We've managed in California without it. And it gave me some hope that maybe we can manage no matter what is done by the Supreme Court. We'll manage. It's sad because we're going to have to do what they call the workarounds, right? But we'll also have to deal with what no affirmative action has really meant in California. It has meant that UC Berkeley has anywhere from 30 to 40% Asian Americans in their freshman classes. Harvard's was it in the 20s and now close to 30. If they get rid of race-based affirmative action and say do away with it, what if Harvard becomes 40% like at UC Berkeley or at some UC campuses? And who will bear the brunt of that excess number of qualified Asian Americans? Will it be the blacks or Hispanics, Native American students? Chances are it will be the white students who have gone from over 50% of the freshman class at Harvard to down in the 40s. Maybe it will be in the 30s. And then what will they say about, we used Asian Americans to get rid of affirmative action. And look, here we are as white people. We're like 30% of the freshman class. How did that happen? So I think that's just one of the ironies that could happen. I mean, you see it in California, UC Berkeley. Take away affirmative action. It's like 30 to 40% Asian American, and there's those freshman classes, and they managed. Meanwhile, you look at black and Hispanic representation in the classes, they've held steady. I mean, it's within a range, but the beneficiaries have been Asians when you get rid of affirmative action, and whites have joined those who have gone down in numbers. So, I think whatever happens with the Supreme Court, I used to dread this week coming. I used to say, this is going to be a tough week, but I say, bring it on. I think we'll do okay. It just means that here come more lawsuits. Here come more, as we move toward a perfect solution, right? They'll get rid, if you say affirmative action isn't perfect, okay. I mean, I think just based on what was brought out in the Harvard trial, you can say, there's some things Harvard shouldn't have done. But even the lower court said Harvard didn't discriminate. I mean, the lower court, if the Supreme Court kicks the case back down to the lower court, Harvard wins, you all have a nice summer. But they could say, let's go narrower. Let's define it more. Let's make it tougher to use race. Maybe that's where the court goes. I don't know. We're all just waiting. So I mentioned Gail Collins and Bret Stephens because they have this conversation. And, it's like, here's the liberal, Gail Collins. Here's the neo-fascist, Bret Stephens. And then they have this nice genial conversation. I'm sure it's edited, so it seems more genial than it is. Bret Stephens says, Gail, I hope your summer is off to a great start. Of course, they're genial, right? Collegial. We're in the season of Supreme Court decisions, waiting any day for the Harvard-UNC ruling to come down, assuming the court overturns affirmative action. Assuming, everyone is assuming, right? Because it's a 6-3 court, right? Conservative. Like I said, it's more complex. You can't assume. I think after the voting rights rulings, can you really assume? Assuming the court overturns affirmative action for private and public universities, and maybe beyond that, what do you think the effect will be? And Gail says, Ms. Collins, I don't know Gail personally. Bret, she knows him personally. I guess we'll have to see how and the why of the much dreaded decision before it's possible to tell. A careful observer with her words, right? And Brett says, the fine print is what has really mattered in past affirmative action cases, going back to the Bakke decision in 1978, which ruled that explicit racial quotas were unconstitutional, but that race could be considered a plus factor in admissions. And Gail says, I'm hoping the court will leave some room for schools and employers to continue taking race into account. And also things like economic background, childhood home environment. I mean, like, for me, I was raised by wolves, clearly. Filipino ones, a subspecies of wolf. Factors that help produce a diverse America where people who come from impoverished communities and disadvantaged homes can get some breaks. Now, I would say, yeah, Gail, thank you for pointing that out. Because, I mean, you're looking at me, Mr. Free Lunch Program. Father, 50 years older, colonized, couldn't marry, couldn't get a job, worked in the kitchens. It gave people from impoverished communities a break. Let's not forget those early recipients. And Brett says, I'd have a much easier time accepting affirmative action if the principal criterion was class, not race. Oh, that's an old one, Brett. They were talking about that in the 80s when it was a big issue. And during the Clinton administration, when the Clinton would say, mend it, don't end it. And the affirmative action was being debated back then. It's always class, not race. I mean, that's been the traditional answer. But it's not that simple. And Brett says, if universities thought of themselves more as ladders of social mobility and less as curators of racial rebalancing, they could still give a lot of poorer minorities a lift while also opening their doors to larger numbers of low-income white students who might otherwise have been denied a shot at admission. Oh yeah, this is standard age-old argument. Oh, what about don't give affirmative action to the Cosby kids? This is before he got busted for Quaalude dispensing. But they would say, the Cosby kids, the kids who are on the Cosby TV show, right? Mr. Huxtable's family. Don't give it to the Huxtables. Give it to the people in the Appalachians. Give it to those kids. That was the argument. Give it to the J.D. Vances so he can come back and be the male Marjorie Taylor Greene. So to that I say, well, thank God he's willing to look at poor Filipino kids and poor black kids and poor brown kids. I mean, he's okay when it's about, race and you're poor. Don't give it to the rich browns and the rich blacks and the rich Asians. I get it. But then he twists it and says, hey, and how about those poor whites? No. Affirmative action was never for the poor whites. And this is kind of the irony. Affirmative action was always for the rich whites. Yeah. Especially if you're an athlete. Especially if your father just gave $2 million to the alumni fund, even though he was not an alumnus. Oh, I'm talking about, what's his name? Donald Trump's son-in-law. His father, who has a checkered past of his own, gave $2 million to Harvard and he got in. Yeah, the guy married to Ivanka. That's affirmative action. That's the kind of affirmative action that does exist. And that's what makes the argument that, oh, let's not forget those those low-income white students. Yeah, the Norma Rays of the world. Oh, yeah. Are we talking about fictional Norma Ray? Are we talking about Sally Field? Let's talk about those poor whites. And then Gail says, you can't leave race out, but yes, it's important to mix it with other parts of a biography. We have to protect schools' right to create a diverse freshman class every year, one that will help students learn the joys and struggles and fun and exasperation that comes from living with people who aren't like you in color, creed, or background. And this is really the virtue of affirmative action, right? It's like you may never get to meet Emil Guillermo except in freshman class. I mean, otherwise, look, let's face it. You will never get a chance to talk to Bill Gates or Steve Ballmer unless you were in their freshman class. And then you might be able to say, hey, Steve, you think LA Clippers got a good chance this year to beat the Warriors? That was my conversation with Steve Ballmer a year ago, June. We were classmates. I see him at reunions. What can I say? And Brett says, oh, but viewpoint diversity is also about making sure universities don't become ideological monocultures where people look different but share nearly all the same opinions and assumptions. Come on, Brett. Look, that's not going to happen. I mean, it's going to happen anyway. You put somebody who's a corporatist in with other corporatists, and that person may be brown or Filipino or Asian, and they're going corporate. You're going to have a monoculture. It's a monoculture. They don't want people who say, you know, I wonder about this capitalist thing. I mean, it's great when you're taking, like, in social studies or something, but all those people who did well in those classes, they're all major partners with big firms on Wall Street. So you don't have to worry about the monoculture. The school is a monoculture. And it's pro-capitalist. So to say that, oh, let's worry about diversity of viewpoint, that is pure BS. Gail has it right. That the virtue of affirmative action is that you get a chance to see these different people you're not going to see. And then after 4 years, or if they leave before fourth year, you may never have to see them again. Unless you're privileged like Bill Gates and get to go to Epstein Island or, you know. And then Gail says, to me, diversity is a very, very important goal. You don't want to be living in a world in which all the folks of one race or class never interact with folks from another. Oh, Gail, that is so right on. It is. How about you, she says to Brett. And Brett says, diversity can be a virtue, but it doesn't have to apply in every conceivable setting or override other considerations, especially academic excellence. Oh, there's that monoculture again. Got to get those good grades in, because that's got to be the arbiter. That's going to be the, you know, you qualified or not qualified. Oh, how'd you do in math? How'd you do in biology? Did you take organic chemistry? Brett says, I don't think it's any secret that students whose families are from East and South Asia outperform many of their peers in high school academics. Now that's a stereotype. I'm sorry, Brett. Stereotype. And he says, just as Jewish kids from immigrant backgrounds did a couple of generations ago. Oh, come on. The only Jewish kid I knew well OD'd. Sophomore year, come on. I mean, stereotype, right? And, you know, he's hearkening back to the There was a time when Jewish kids were discriminated against, and that was a part of this case at Harvard. But I think the racism here, there are other aspects of the racist element in the Harvard case, and one of them is that personality profile. Let's go back to Brett. He says, if the end of affirmative action means that top tier universities will be demographically overrepresented with students of Asian background for the simple reason that they work that much harder to get there, should that be considered a problem? Oh, well. So he likes the fact of elite colleges being 40% Asian. I mean, I think that's what they're preparing for. If you're going to get rid of Asian America, or if you're going to get rid of Asian America, AA, I meant affirmative action. If you're going to get rid of affirmative action, you got to prepare yourself for this fact that these schools may be 40, 50% Asian American, like UC Berkeley. And then Gail says, of course, we have to include and celebrate the many fabulous students with East and South Asian backgrounds. Thank you, Gail. And part of the educational opportunities they deserve is a chance to be in school with kids from other backgrounds. Oh, yeah, see. That was me. I was there to be their tour guide, their modern American translator of the racial diversity of America. And Gail says, so that they graduate with the ability to work with, supervise, and take directions from Black, white, and Hispanic colleagues. It's a win-win. Yes, I know you because I was in African American studies with you. You were the only white person there, and I was. That's the diversity argument. And she calls it a win. It is a win-win, I think. And Brett says it would be win-win if universities vastly expanded their enrollments, perhaps by doing more of the coursework online so that every academically qualified student got in. For now, it's zero sum. See, now this is a good point, because I always said you look at the number of resources, and Harvard only admits about 2,000 in their freshman class each and every year. How can they get more? They can't. It's always 2,000. And then what happens when the number of applicants skyrockets, as it has over the last 10, 15 years? Now you got more people for fewer spaces, more disappointment. They're not all being discriminated against. And yet there are people who say, I'm being discriminated against, Asian Americans. They're saying that, and I'm saying you're not being discriminated against. You got to look at the other ways to solve this problem. Brett says, for now, it's zero sum. A zero-sum game. For every winner, there's a loser, right? At Harvard in 2013, according to the initial lawsuit, 19% of the admitted class was Asian American, even though that number would have been 43% if based on academic performance alone. And I think that's something that people understand. It can't be on academic performance alone. Not unless you somehow expand those resources. He said expand the enrollments by doing more coursework online. That's not going to do it. What's going to do it is you take away the outsized importance of the elite university. And you somehow motivate other schools that aren't quite at that super elite level to step up and say, look, we'll accept you, we'll encourage you, you have more assets, you have more resources. If you come to our school, we're not in the Harvard class. But some are. I mean, the so-called little Ivies. Go to Amherst, Williams. Is that a step down? You go to a UC, not Berkeley, but maybe UC Santa Cruz, UC Irvine, Santa Barbara. Is that a step down? I think we got to get out of this brand name thing. And Gail says, have a feeling this isn't going to be the last time we debate this issue. But Brett, we've had a busy news week or so. This is the thing. It is not going to be the last time we debate this issue. And that's why, ultimately, I feel good about the Supreme Court waiting to the last week, because it's given me time to think about all this and given me time to say, it's not so bad. We'll survive. But I mean it. I think we're going to be. I think for some of us who've been through this first generation of affirmative action, it will be sad. It'll be a sad day. Because it means that we'll have to fight even harder for that sense of justice that we thought we already had. Anyway, we'll wait, see. It could drop. They got the gay website designer and the student loan thing. That might drop maybe Tuesday, Wednesday. Maybe they save the affirmative action for Friday and they get out of town. The Supreme Court. Let's see what happens. But I say, bring it on. Yesterday was Pride Parade Day, and I didn't go to the Pride Parade, but my dog was playing all day with this rainbow stuffed animal. And this was one of many rainbow stuffed animals that my dog had. She has a gender ambiguous name, Billy. Could be Billy D. Williams, could be Billie Holiday. Good African American name. Could be. So Billy was playing with this rainbow dog, and that was our participation in the overall global sense of gay pride throughout the land. I mean, big parade in New York, big parade in San Francisco. Usually I go to those parades, and I went back to my photographs of past parades, and I was there in 2015, 8 years ago, right? 8 years ago, for the when Obergefell, right, the plaintiff in the same-sex marriage case, was in the parade in San Francisco. There I was. I waved. He wasn't in the role that I had, but I remember he was there. And this is the 8th year of that decision. That's how important these cases are. And how quickly things can, the ebb and flow of justice, it's unpredictable. Just like people are talking about right now. They're talking about 1 year after, Dobbs, which essentially ended Roe v. Wade, the right to abortion in America. And now it's all topsy-turvy politics. And you can get an abortion if you're willing to drive. But it's a kind of a strange America when you're doing something that many people in this country are just dead set against. rather than, and it's against the law, rather than having an honest disagreement, but living in a land where you respect your disagreements and you can, because in a health situation like abortion, it's important. It's important to be behind the health of our people and not to force them into situations where they're traveling across state lines. And now there are attempts for laws to try to stop that. So this ebb and flow of the law, not a lawyer, I'm just an observer. I'm just thinking, wow, we're in this era now where 8 years after the Obergefell same-sex marriage decision, we are out there pointing the finger and othering trans people as a way to get at the overall LGBTQ plus community. And it's not just a matter of them staying together, it's a matter of all of us staying together, talking about allies, people who believe those kind of freedoms, to make sure that we don't see the rediscrimination. Why do we have to go through this? So I like to go through the right-wing sites to see what they're talking about. And of course, there are so many anti-trans things, because trans, that's the new, they're the villains in our democracy. And I didn't know about Rachel Levine until today, but one of the trans sites was saying, hey, this Rachel Levine, she's a deputy secretary of HHS, and she does a talk show on the web, and she talked to a trans activist. And Rachel Levine is herself a transgender. She's an admiral in the Navy. She's a trans politician. She got through all the confirmation battles. I wonder what her confirmation battle would be today if she were nominated for this position and had to undergo a battle. What kind of battle would she have today? Rachel Levine, look her up. It's an interesting show. I didn't know who she was. She's about my age, and she even went to Harvard. Oh yeah, I was looking at Wikipedia. It said Harvard, a couple of years behind me, and now she is a trans hero. She is an Amok American hero. Now, I just think you put on a uniform and you make no bones about, hey, I'm a trans woman, and you serve as the secretary to HHS, and you do this web show. The right is out there saying, hey, look, here's this trans woman, let's go get her. And I read the right-wing websites. I read that and I said, yeah, you go get him, Rachel. Rachel Levine, the admiral, trans activist. Well, I know she's an activist. She's a trans politician. Yeah, I think you could say trans. She's a role model. And she's like I said, an admiral. An admiral. People should be going up to Rachel Levine and saying, thank you for your service. So I point to her as a hero. She's a hero. She's got to be a hero. All right, tomorrow I was going to talk about Marianne Williamson, but we've gone over. Got excited. So I'll talk about that tomorrow. She's running for president. There was a big thing in the Times today about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the Asian American columnist, Farhad Manjoo, said, look, I tried to debate him, and I should have known. You cannot debate a conspiracy theorist. And it's not that, going up against Kennedy is a losing battle, but you go against someone who is dead set against the facts. What are you going to debate? You can't debate. You're up against a name and an image and a feeling. You're up against a conspiracy theorist. I mean, I mentioned Bobby Kennedy because a friend of mine who's conservative talked to me and said, hey, Bobby Kennedy Jr., huh? I said, well, wait, I'm a 6-time vaxxer. I'm not a Bobby Kennedy fan. I mean, he's all right, but I'm not voting for Bobby Kennedy. But this is the danger about Bobby Kennedy. In that column in the Times today, when you go up against a conspiracy theorist, you're not debating facts, you're debating feeling. And you're not going to refute that. You're going to be down parallel argument. And in the end, it's persuasiveness is not about the truth. Persuasiveness is about other things outside of the truth. Because the argument, a conspiracy theorist is not about truth. It's not about fact. That's the dangerous thing about Bobby Kennedy. Now, Marianne Williamson, on the other hand, I was trying to explain to my friend, Marianne Williamson is sort of like, if there's a religious right, she's kind of like the religious left, although she's not really dogmatic. She's an amalgam of all these different religions, meditation, Judaism, Christianity. She's the kind, she talks about God and Christ, but, she's more of the, whomever you believe is your higher power or energy force. She's non-sectarian, but she's just of a good heart. And there's no conspiracy, unless, of course, you think love is a conspiracy. Love, Emil? See, this is the thing about Marianne Williamson. I think whenever you're running a campaign based on love versus fear, when does that ever happen? I think it could be kind of refreshing. I don't know if she can run this big bureaucracy known as the United States. But I think we have come to a time, especially when we have all the religious zealots to the right. It's about time that people on the left can look to someone who believes in spirit, who believes in love, and make sense about how to approach problems with policies that deal with people as real human beings. And I don't think we get that from the religious right. We get a lot of hypocrisy. We get a lot of hate. And I just think if you don't know who Marianne Williamson is, give her a chance. I mean, or listen to her. She's no crackpot. She's pretty smart, I think. And not just that, but if we had a politics that was based on that kind of humanity, that kind of feeling of love for one another, man, you think we'd be debating healthcare the way we are? You know, I don't think so. I think the thing about Marianne is that she's almost too good for politics, and she'll be made merciless fun of, no doubt, like she was last time she ran. But I think she's worth listening to, because it takes courage to have attitudes like she has and to show them. You know, I mean, you look at the religious right. Was George Bush made fun of when he talked about 1,000 points of light and people trying to help each other? I mean, that's a response on the right. Marianne Williamson is like a response on the left. But like I said, I don't know how successful she's going to be. She'll probably be a burr on the side of people to make people, I don't know, she just makes sense. She just makes more sense than you think. And I'm trying to find this she does this thing on Substack, morning meditation, and it's kind of interesting. Oh, today, if you go to Substack, it's part of Transform with Marianne Williamson. The morning meditation for today is, I seek a bigger life today. Now you tell me, is this person crackpot? If you had politicians who talked like this, wouldn't this be better in some ways? I seek a bigger life today. I cannot live in fear and expect great love. I cannot be narrow-minded and expect the world to open up to me. I cannot experience my full potential unless I'm willing to take risks. Today, I pray for courage. I surrender the attitudes and behavioral patterns that keep from me my greater good. I'm willing to be a bigger person, that I might have a bigger life. And she ends with a prayer. Dear God, please remove the fears in me that keep a fuller life at bay. Interrupt the patterns of weakness I have inherited from former times. Deliver me to my greater self. Amen. I seek a bigger life today. I mean, you had politicians talking like that, you might see the great divide that is America dissolve, and have people be more open, working together for a common purpose. That's why Marianne Williamson is at least worth thinking about as she campaigns for president. So that's go to Substack, transform Marianne Williamson, and see her daily meditations. I think they're helpful. You may not have to vote. I mean, maybe don't vote for her, but meditate with her. Will change the world. All right, still waiting for the Supreme Court to make up their mind. Hey, that's it for our show today. We're here Monday through Friday, usually for just under an hour. But, you know, sometimes there's just so much to talk about in the news. And this is a micro talk show where we talk about these things. VChin, got to talk about that. Got to talk about the New York Times. Got to talk about Rachel Levine. God, Rachel Levine. And Marianne, got to talk about Marianne Williamson. Especially if I mention Bobby Kennedy today. I mean, it's only those three, Bobby Kennedy, Marianne Williamson, and Joe Biden. And it's no shoe-in for Biden, but when it comes to those three, do not give short shrift to Marianne Williamson. At least meditate with her. All right, Monday through Friday, 2 o'clock Pacific. At Emil Amok on Twitter, at Emil Amok1 on YouTube, Facebook, emilguillermo.media. Thank you for being here. We just do this news talk thing where I am your second screen, right? You just open up a browser and, let Emil talk. Sometimes we'll have guests, sometimes not. But I'll always bring you something interesting, an interesting take, my takes on all things considerable. The Asian American. What does an Asian American think? Well, this is what this Asian American thinks. All right. And, you know, I like to meditate, which is why I was attracted to Marianne Williamson. One of the reasons. You know, it's all about love, but also self-love. And the self-love starts by extending it to others. And then it comes back. Hey, that's like democracy. And so, as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Emil Guillermo here. Till next time. Mahal Gita.